Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 47, recording on Thursday evening. By the time you guys are listening to this, it'll be Friday, and we have a guest for you later in the show. His name's Colton Pouncy. He covers the Lions for The Athletic, one of my teammates, one of my college classmates at Mizzou. Pumped to have him on. He's covered the Lions for multiple seasons, so always good to go back and forth. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank here in the local area. Some really big Vikings fans have been texting me about this upcoming game. Run that thing. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. They cannot wait for the matchup. I cannot wait for the matchup, but really check them out. Local branches all across the Minnesota area. And you guys will enjoy the online banking, every aspect of the things that they do. So really good stuff. First Resource Bank. Appreciate them presenting the show as always. If you do not know me, I cover the Vikings every day for The Athletic. That is why I am here inside the building. Again, it's late at night. I'm here. It's grind time. It takes every ounce of it's late in the season. You give everything you got, and I can't wait to do that. Very much as I said, very much looking forward to Sunday night. It's going to be a long wait until then. A lot of analysis, a lot of stories, a lot of perspective. Cannot wait for it. So yeah, this is why you do it. I said to somebody earlier today, you could talk about the Sam Darnold future stuff and all that, but I think that you would be missing the chance to enjoy what is one of the most special seasons probably that you guys have seen, and you've been here doing this a lot longer than I have. And so it's just hard for me to live anywhere else but the present. I was driving to the facility early this week, and I said this to a lot of people, but as I was driving, I'm thinking man, there is no guarantee that you cover a season like this, that you get to cover a team that is as special as this one. I've talked to multiple players in the locker room even today about how just unique, and I don't use that word because it literally means singular one, unique, but a unique a locker room this is. And so it's just really cool, hard to take for granted given how special it is. So appreciate you guys being here and listening as always. Any questions you got, throw those at me in the comment section on Twitter. I'll get to as many as I can. In the meantime, we're going to get right to it. Here is Colton Pouncy, our Lions writer at The Athletic, talking about Sunday night's game. Colton, welcome to the Alec Lewis Show. How are you? Welcome back, really.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm repping. I think I wore this hat the first time we recorded, and now we're one of the few SEC teams actually holding it down for the conference. So,
that's good. That's funny. I just left Vikings practice. Phil Pressey was in there. The Celtics are playing the Wolves. He coaches for the Celtics, and he's walking by, and I'm an idiot. Okay. So I go, "Hey, MIZ." He's like, "Whoa!" It's like in the middle of practice. Probably should have done that. But anyway. No. So if I told you 5 years ago, we're at Mizzou, you're grinding, covering the football team. I don't know what I'm doing, probably covering tennis or something. If I said, in 5 years, it's going to be the grand finale of the NFL season, and it's going to be the Lions and the Vikings, and you're going to be covering that game, you would have said what?
I don't know. It's going to be a blast, I guess, but also I don't know. That's probably where I wanted to be. I always wanted to cover the NFL. I think back then 5 years ago, I feel like I was covering Michigan State. I was in college. I'm older than you, man. I'm washed. So that would have been 7 years ago, my senior year. But yeah, man, I'm excited for this game.
Honestly, though, 5 years ago for me, I might have been out of college. I don't know. Time's flying. This is the craziest season in the history of ever. No, not really, but it's been wild. Let's hop right into it. I want to start here essentially because I just want to get a feel for this Lions team as good as I can. Has there been anything that a defense has tried to do to this Lions offense, to Ben Johnson's offense, that you feel like consistently has worked against it? Anything?
This season or even the past couple of years, not really. I would say the team that's done the best job against them, I would say, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that's more personnel and game plan wise for the Lions. Really, I mean, Vita Vea up there in the middle, he's giving them a lot of problems. Like that's the only dude that can toss Frank Ragnow around like a ragdoll, pun intended there. And yeah, but I don't know. I feel like when they play the Bucks, Ben Johnson, really the game plan the last two times they played has been let's throw to set up the run and let's get them, moving sideline to sideline, then we'll run up the middle. That game plan hasn't worked. And they've usually had to get away from it and then just say, you know what, we're one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. Let's just run it. And that kind of works. But I mean, one of their two losses this regular season was against the Bucks in week two. Lost that one 2016. And I almost feel like 9 times out of 10 they win that game because I believe they went 1 of 7 in the red zone in that game. So you go 2 of 7, you win it. So again, I would say it's more the Lions losing track of like who they are, or I hate to nitpick, but Ben Johnson getting a little too cute sometimes is kind of like their downfall. But not many teams have been able to stop them over the years. It's really been just a couple.
Well,
I would
I
say.
asked that because I mean I'm looking back at you saw probably earlier this week. I was looking at the previous matchups between Brian Flores and Ben Johnson, and Ben's averaged 30, and the Lions have averaged 30 points a game against Brian Flores in the last year and a half. I know they played late last season where the Vikings, they were leaking oil at that point, and then earlier this year the Vikings
Right.
did not have Blake Cashman, who is one of the most important players on this entire roster in terms of what he allows for this defense. But I was just like, what could they do? Like, what could they try to do? And so I can't. It's hard for me to come up with a lot. I mean, this past week against the Packers, the Vikings played like 50% man coverage out of nowhere, and it bothered Matt LaFleur. But to me, I mean, it probably starts. I mean, it definitely starts with stopping the Lions' run game and stopping Jahmyr Gibbs and that offensive line. I mean, how has that run game looked of late, specifically without David Montgomery?
Yeah, obviously David was around the first matchup and had a costly fumble in
Yeah.
that game that I think the Vikings capitalized off of with a touchdown. So, but every other game he's been pretty consistent. Just been without in the last couple of ones here. So Jahmyr Gibbs has been leading the charge here, and he's a guy I think the Vikings liked a couple years ago at the draft. Just as a dynamic weapon out of the backfield, can catch in space, and he's just so explosive. And so like there was really no panic when Montgomery went down over here because they knew that they had a 12th overall pick waiting in the wings for more opportunities, and he's kind of made the most of those since he's taken on that lead back role. Over 100 rushing yards. I think he's averaging like 150 plus yards from scrimmage since he's taken over, something like that. So he's been pretty dangerous out of the backfield, and I think he missed the tough yards that Montgomery was able to get between the tackles, and Gibbs can get some of those, but he has to work at it a little bit more. There's a sequence against the Bears a couple weeks ago where they're inside the 3. Normally that's automatic for Montgomery, but it took the Lions like 4 tries to get the touchdown, three maybe. Um, and so that's kind of where you miss Montgomery the most. But I mean, Gibbs is still plenty capable, and he gives you a lot more in terms of juice in the
In that
backfield.
first matchup, he had the 45-yard run down the sideline where Cam Bynum's ankles were laying on the ground after that. And I love Cam, and he knows that. But I remember talking to Cam the day after the locker room. He's like, I mean, that guy is just really good. But that's the longest run they've given up to that point. It's the longest run they've given up all year. And so, I mean, for me, like
Mhm.
I remember coming out of that game having conversations with people, and a lot of the Vikings thought was like, how do we limit explosive plays? The problem, and the reason I started the podcast the way I did was because, like, I mean, I don't think Jamison Williams did much in that first game, but it looks like watching them from
No.
afar, I mean, he's really, really come on. And so I just like listening to you, it feels like you're saying like the weak point is like sometimes they get too cute, which is probably a byproduct of being as good as they've been and as creative as they've been. Is there any other weak point at all, really?
Yeah, in the games that they've kind of struggled offensively this year, like they've given up interior pressure, and it's usually when Frank has a bad game or Graham Glasgow, their starting left guard, has a bad game. And Graham's been pretty shaky this year, so if you can get to him and have a clear lane to Jared Goff, he can, I think he's been better against pressure this year than most years in his career, but still susceptible to it at times. So I think that's probably where you want to start. Um, Again, it's kind of hard elsewhere because you look at the receiving options. Like Sam Laporta was off to a slow start at the beginning of the year, but he's been one of the better tight ends in football the last 5 weeks or so, really coming on strong when they need him the most. Jameson Williams, as you mentioned, is having a really good second half of the year, especially. Like he had the blip in the radar a little bit with the suspension. Since he's come back from that, it's been awesome. And they're working to get him the ball a lot more than they have in the past. And I think they now have four players, if you count Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams. Four players with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage this season, which I think is the second time it's been done in NFL history. I think the Colts in like 2004 maybe might be the only other team, something like that. So they have so many weapons that they can beat you with, but I do think it probably starts with winning in the trenches, which the Vikings do a good job of. So if they can kind of disrupt things up front, I think that's probably one of the keys to winning on
Yeah, and
Sunday.
I mean, I really do think Blake Cashman's presence, it allows having Ivan Pace more as a blitzer, whereas in that first matchup, he was more of like the middle of the field type defender, and the Lions attacked the middle of the field. And then I also think Blake Cashman in coverage, I mean, he takes really good angles on like underneath stuff, quick outlets. So to me, his presence can be pretty interesting. But I mean, you say like all of those stats. I mean, I was looking the last 4 weeks. I mean, it's second in EPA per play. Offensively, the Lions are. It's first in points per drive. It's explosive plays. It's yards per play. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So I wanted to start there. Just get out of the way how much I feel like this offense is going to be extremely, extremely difficult to stop. And then segue a little bit. I mean, it looks like Alex Anzalone has a chance maybe to play in this game. How do you feel about him from an injury standpoint? And then what else are you watching injury-wise if there is anything notable?
Yeah, I think he's pretty much it. Like a lot of their injuries have been like torn ACLs and like, elbow injuries or torn pecs, things like that. So you're out for the whole year. Anzalone is like one of the few guys that can come back and make an impact. And it sounds like, if I had to guess, he's going to try to play. He broke his forearm about 5-6 weeks ago now. So he's right on the timeline. I think it was a 6-week timeline, 6 to 8 weeks maybe. So this would be on the early end of that. But this is sort of the week that they're always targeting. I think they knew how important this Vikings game would be just based on how the standings were shaken up. I'm pretty sure Dan Campbell kind of figured the Vikings were going to lose another game after that Rams one. And he has a ton of respect for Kevin O'Connell and those guys. So anytime you can get a captain back, like Alex Anzalone, he's a great coverage linebacker. He does so much in the middle of the field and wears the green dot for this defense. That's going to help you out. But there have been a lot of injuries elsewhere. Like Carlton Davis played that first time around. He's not going to be here. So now you have a rookie in Terrion Arnold and Amik Robertson, who they moved out from the slot to the outside, trying to guard Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Like that's not the best matchup for either guy. The defensive line has been decimated. Like if they still had Lee McNeil around, I think I'd feel somewhat confident in that group. But now he's gone, and they're kind of throwing different guys out and seeing who can stick. So, the injuries are starting to catch up with them. I think you can tell by the points per game they've allowed the last 3-4 games like that. So, gonna be a tough task on Sunday.
Well, that's
sure.
why I mentioned the offensive stats, but I looked at the last 4 games defensively, and these numbers, but it was last in EPA per play. I think success rate, they're like 31st. They're giving up 7.4 yards per play. That's 32nd. I mean, it's 30. They're 31st in explosive play rate against. So that's. I mean, I'm thinking about that unit against this Vikings offense that is clicking at its peak right now. To me is interesting. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but to get into the front, Zadarius Smith. I mean, like, what has he brought? And from a pressure standpoint, like, is it just blitz every time? Like, how have they approached it? I guess the numbers I could look at. I mean, it looks like they're blitzing, I don't know, at a pretty good clip. But how have they approached just trying to create pressure with the front without Aleem McNeil?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you have Aiden Hutchinson on one side, Zadarius on the other, and let those guys go to work. But they're going to have to manufacture some looks here, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. I think Sam Darnold's pretty good against the blitz, and this Vikings offense has been pretty solid against the blitz this year. But Aaron Glenn is a DC that loves to draw it up. So if that's the game plan, he's going to try to send some guys. I think getting a guy like a Fatu Melifonwu back, he's probably their best blitzing DB, like him and Brian Branch. He missed most of the season. His first game was a couple weeks ago, and he's against the Bears. So he's back in the mix now. I want to say the last 4 weeks of the year last year, weeks 15 to 18, he was third overall in the NFL in defensive splash plays. Like just an incredible run that helped their defense making plays from getting interceptions, as we saw on Christmas Eve last year. He's great at blitzing, as I mentioned. So he's just wreaking havoc last year. I think the Lions are hoping he can tap into some of that this year. Kirby Joseph, Minnesota's favorite player. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean,
And I'm sure Minnesota's
leads the
his
league in
favorite
interceptions.
team too.
Exactly. Yeah, love each other. Yeah, he's first in the league in interceptions with 9 this season. So they kind of rely on like these big plays, knowing that they're going to give up yards. Teams are going to be able to move the ball. They really have to stand their ground in the red zone and then create turnovers. And I think they have some of the personnel to do it, but it's kind of a week to week thing here.
What do you feel like Aaron Glenn's disposition has been over this stretch where, I mean, again, when you've taken the amount of personnel hits that they've taken and guys they've allocated serious resources on, it doesn't take like a rocket scientist to know that it's going to be impossible to uphold it. Like what has been his approach just talking to you guys and just from what you've seen from him? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think what he's shown the last 5, 6 weeks is exactly why he's going to be a head coach in this league one day, because there's really no panic from him. A lot of guys would, blame it on injuries or, have these excuses and whatnot. But, um, I mean, his whole approach has been, if you're playing for us and you're on the field, whether we sign you from the street like Jamal Adams or you've been here for 4 years now, there's a certain level of play that we expect from you guys. And obviously we haven't lived up to it, but everything that we do is about playing hard, being physical, and giving it our all. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to play for us. And like, it's really that simple with him. Haven't had the desired results, but I think that 49ers game, that was a motivated 49ers team. Like, it might not seem like it, they got some guys that were injured, but Kyle Shanahan was trying to put points on them. Fred Warner, that pregame speech that he had, like talking about how the Lions are coming to the West Coast to try to beat them, but that wasn't going to happen. Like, that was a team that was playing hard, and they gave the Lions their all. But I think you saw kind of the recipe there in the second half, with the turnovers, giving the ball back to the offense, getting stops where you can, getting off the field where you can. Like, Dan Campbell's whole approach has been, I don't care if we go up 700 yards, as long as we win by 1 point, I'm happy. And like, that's really what's going to be. Like, that's a recipe in the playoffs as they move forward. Maybe it looks a little different if you get a guy like Anzalone back and maybe some other pieces along the way. But they know, like, they're going to have to win shootouts, and they're going to have to rely on some opportunistic plays from their defense to kind of guide them, because they're not going to stop offenses and hold them under 200 yards or 300 yards
Yeah.
anymore.
The last 4 games, their man coverage rate is third in the NFL. So, I mean, you mentioned Amik, but like, I can't imagine they're going to try to play man against Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. I can't imagine. It would be.
I mean, I can. That's what they do. They have the highest man coverage rate in the NFL for the whole year, I feel like. So, I mean, maybe it's one of those scenarios where you play more zone this game. Maybe Minnesota's expecting man, so you kind of do the opposite. But I mean, this team is built to play man
Yeah.
coverage, and like a lot of those guys aren't here anymore, like Carlton and whatnot. But like that's why you built this defense, and it's gotten you through the year. So I don't know if you really want to change up and go more zone for the biggest game of the year, but we'll see. We'll find
It'd
out
be
on Sunday.
very interesting. I mean, what is there anything else
Yeah.
that you're looking at from a matchup standpoint that we haven't discussed? It's like I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think linebacker play outside of Jack Campbell the last 6 weeks has been pretty abysmal
Yeah.
for the Lions. And I wonder how the tight end matchup is going to look like. And if Anzalone's back, I think they do a better job of maybe, covering TJ Hawkinson. But I could see it if he's not ready to go yet. I really do not trust the guys that they put out next to Jack Campbell. So I wonder how that's going to look, and the stuff over the middle of the field, because we know the Vikings offense is so good at those in-breaking routes and finding those soft zones. So I feel like that could be um, probably an issue for them. That was really what did them in against the Bills a couple weeks ago. Everything over the middle of the field was there for them. So if Anzalone's not out there, that could be a spot for them to take advantage of. And honestly, even the run game, like the defensive line is not what it once was. So I think you could have success on the ground with Aaron Jones and whatnot. So I'm kind of worried about that for the Lions. If I think they should be worried about that, but again, we'll see. There's something about this team though that they just kind of rise to the challenge. They rise to the occasion, and it could be with like no names on the field and guys just see you're like, where'd he come from? I don't even recognize that dude in the locker room, but he's out there playing on Sunday. But there's just something about this team. Like Dan gets them ready to play, so I do think it'll be competitive, even if they do lose. I think they'll put up a fight with everything they have. So it'll be interesting
It's
for sure.
fascinating because and it might be cliche, but it's like this Vikings team, and the people listening know this, and you know it. Like they also the amount of heart like on this team
Yes.
is, and they are well coached. And Kevin O'Connell it is. And I know you said this earlier, but I know there is a ton of respect on the Vikings side for the way this Lions staff goes about it and the players they have. So it's it's
Yeah.
awesome. I can't wait.
There's like a secret sauce on both of these teams. That's what I really respect about this
Yeah.
matchup. Like seeing the locker room video with Sam Darnold and all the players lifting him up, dumping water on him, and then the zoom out to see Kevin O'Connell just like admiring the culture he's built. That was so cool. And like, if you can't appreciate that, you don't love football because, I mean, I think these teams are kind of built similarly like that. They play for each other, and that's something that kind of goes unnoticed sometimes. And a lot of teams in the NFL don't like each other. They're just collecting a check. But it really feels like these two teams, that might be the secret sauce to their success and why they're able to win close games and grind it out when everyone thinks that they're not going to. So now you put those two teams 14-2. The loser will be the first ever 14-win wild card team. Like that's insane. Like I'm so much at stake on Sunday, but it's gonna be awesome,
Yeah,
man.
and I think you're right. I think the chemistry of the units is like, and I'm sure you're this way, but this Vikings team sometimes in the locker room reminds me of just like a high school group of buddies, which is
Yeah,
it's kind of wild. But I can't wait. It was great back in the summer when they handed us the script and I saw this was on it. I was like, this is great. So I couldn't. Yeah,
you might
right.
check it on the calendar. You
Yeah,
circle
that's
it.
exactly right.
Yeah,
Looking forward to seeing you.
but no,
Can't wait. It will be a blast. Thanks for doing it. I'll let you get to the locker room, and we will talk very soon. Appreciate it, Colton.
absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on.
And that'll do it for episode 47 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate you guys being here and listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Colton. I mean, it's going to be as interesting as it gets. I laid out the offensive and defensive numbers for the Lions. You guys know what the Vikings have been about of late. The offense is rolling. The defense has put together game plans that can confound opposing offenses. So this environment, Justin Jefferson spoke earlier today. It's like, oh, I'm excited. I am excited. And this is the type of game that he lives for. It's funny. I was in the locker room just bouncing around. He has a game ball from his first ever touchdown catch in college, an LSU game against Ole Miss. But the environments of those games, of that and SEC football, like that is what is in his. That's what he does. That's why he does this. And you could just tell as he spoke today how excited, really, genuinely he is for this matchup. So can't wait for it. Like I said at the top, any questions you got, toss them my way. More than happy to answer them. Appreciate you guys being here as always. Next week, we will see what happens, where I am. If we get a bye weekend to rest, recover, recoup, and work on other stories. But regardless, it's going to be a blast. Thank you guys for being here. That is episode 47, a quicker one of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate it.